Our mission is to create equity through the human voice and to give people the skills, confidence, and control to find, use, and own their authentic voice. We do this by utilizing proven techniques and exercises that we have created to help our clients become more effective and efficient communicators. We work one-on-one, we work with entire teams, and we do workshops much like the Lunch and Learn that we are doing today. What are we doing today? First, you're going to learn about how your voice affects your listeners' decisions and how to use that to your advantage. Then we're going to give you techniques to give you complete control over your voice. And then finally, we're going to explore the vocal characteristics to help you optimize your voice for authentic, persuasive, and powerful communication. I want to say today is an interactive workshop. So I would love for you to come off of mute during the exercise portion. I would love for you to be on video the whole time. We're going to ask you questions. We're going to make noises. And we're going to make kind of silly noises. If you are in a place where you are comfortable doing that, that's amazing. If you are not in a place but adjacent to a place where you feel comfortable moving around and making sound, I would love for you to move there now. At any point in time, if the exercise we're doing are making you feel uncomfortable, if they hurt, if you feel lightheaded, stop and send Cassidy a message. Nothing we do should be uncomfortable. Nothing we should do should be painful. So if that's happening, it means that something isn't going the way we want it to. And so we'd love to make sure that we kind of fix that so that you can walk away being able to practice what we teach you. Now, I want to begin this workshop with some vocal pain points. Everyone who's here today, if you could raise your virtual hand if you have ever received any of this feedback, okay? Have you ever been told that you don't have presence, enough presence, executive presence, the right presence? Have you ever had trouble being heard? Perhaps your voice is quiet, or perhaps you're that person at the table who you say your idea, 2 minutes later, another one of your coworkers says the exact same idea, and all of a sudden, they're the most brilliant person for having this brilliant idea. Yeah, I see a few hands being raised with this one. Yeah, I think a lot of us have been there, right? Do you ever get nervous if everyone's hand isn't up? Right? Actually, if your hand isn't up, please drop in the chat how you deal with nerves. That's great. But really, we all get nervous, and that actually is energy, which I will talk a lot about this later, but energy is the life force of sound. So nerves are part of your voice. Have you ever been misunderstood despite careful language choices? So perhaps you are a very direct communicator, and then maybe you get feedback that you're aggressive or intense. Right? Do you ever have issues with audience engagement? So you're on a Zoom call and you see people checking their email or their phone, or they're walking around or not paying attention. Do you ever feel like you lose control over your voice? So maybe when you get nervous, you feel like you start to run out of air and maybe your voice gets a little bit higher, or maybe if you're talking, sometimes a sound you don't like comes out and you don't understand why that's happening. Right? Have you ever been told to be quieter, louder, take up more space, take up less space? I've gotten all four of these in my life. Yeah. And then have you ever been told you have an age sound? Perhaps you've been told that you just don't have the maturity, or you're not old enough, or you don't have an old enough presence in order to have the position that you're trying to get, or in order to be taken seriously in the field that you're in. These are all problems that we solve for. What are the benefits of knowing your voice? Well, first and foremost, it gives you control over your authentic voice and how people interact with you in the world. It gives you knowledge of how your voice works. And at Peacock Voices, we truly believe that knowledge is opportunity. So the more knowledge you have, the more opportunities you have to be exactly what you want to be. It allows for you to make real-time adjustments. So as I'm talking right now, I am changing my sound and I'm making these instantaneous adjustments to change the culture of the space that we're in. It allows for you to have vocal options to control specific situations. So, right here, I can change the culture in this room. If things were getting heated, I can bring down that energy. Or perhaps I want to get people really excited and I want everybody to be really amped during this workshop. Or maybe I'm trying to get you to pay attention, right? Having these vocal options to control the room that you're in gives you flexibility to do that, gives you tools to utilize nerves as a benefit. So I mentioned this in the previous slide, but nervous energy is energy. Energy is the life force of sound. And so actually having nervous energy is a tool, because if you can harness that energy to support your voice, then it's actually a positive, right? It allows for you to have clear and expressive speech, so your intent and your content and your delivery all match. And then finally, it allows for you to understand the cultural uniqueness of your voice. Is anyone in here bilingual, trilingual, whatever the words are after that? Yeah, awesome, very cool. So basically, every language has its own superpower. In the English language, we express ourselves through consonants. I love you. But let's say you grew up in a home that speaks a Romance language, Spanish, Italian, French. Amore, right? That's using those elongated vowels. So English is a very percussive language, consonant driven. We have very strong consonants versus Italian or other Romance languages that are vowel driven. What if you combine that and all of a sudden you have a really melodic and powerful speech pattern because you took those two superpowers and you combined them? And so understanding the languages you speak and how you can capitalize on that. This allows you to portray charisma, power, authority, consistency, confidence, joy, anything else that you want to be portraying in your everyday and work life. I want to take a second to step back from the actual voice and talk about research around voice, okay? So, charismatic speech has been proven to make listeners more attentive and increases the willingness of employees or students to learn, act, and work in an effective and committed manner. So, charismatic speech leads to more effective leadership. On top of that, studies consistently show that delivery is the most important factor in persuading listeners for both men and women. We're all women here today, so as we know, we do need to outperform our male counterparts in order to have the same persuasive effect. But the reality is delivery trumps content. I want to take a step deeper into how women are at a disadvantage. There was a study done in 2018 where researchers used technology to make men's voices sound like women's voices. And listeners judged how persuasive those voices sounded. The resulting female speakers sounded on average less charismatic by 29%, less likable by 31%, and less confident by 13% in the ears of listeners, which means that we need to be 29% more vocally charismatic, 31% more vocally likable, and 13% more vocally confident in order to be equal with our male counterparts. Because we live in a digital age, I'm also going to add in the fact that we do know that applied audio compression significantly influences the assessment of a speaker's charismatic impact. And female speakers are systematically disadvantaged by audio compression rates and techniques. So speaking through these microphones in our computers and our phones, we are at a disadvantage with this because of the way these techniques operate. For leadership and funding, we know that women make up 45% of the S&P 500 workforce, but only 21% end up in senior leadership positions, and only 6% end up as CEOs. On top of that, women-led startup funding has dropped in the past several years from 2.6 to 1.9% of funding. But when women do get funded, we deliver more money, We hire more women. So startups with a female founder hire 2.5 times more women. And startups with a female founder and a female executive hire 6 times more women. On top of that, women-led businesses are much more likely to be focused on making a social contribution and building good relationships with employees and the communities that they operate inside of. So when women do end up in these leadership positions, we actually lift up other women and we try to lift up the communities around us. Now, how do we do that, right? That's why we're here today. So I want to talk for a second, your vocal brand and what it is. Your voice is like your thumbprint. It is uniquely yours. I think we've all had the experience of sitting in our basement or somewhere in our house and hearing our mom or an uncle or an aunt or a sibling yell our name, and we know exactly how much trouble we're in and we know who it is, right? And it's because that is their vocal thumbprint. That is their voice. It is so uniquely theirs. What we don't talk about as a society is that your voice is a choice. A lot of us operate with our voice being a reaction to the cultures around us and to the voices around us. But in reality, you get to pick, and we want your voice to match who you are. So unlike your actual thumbprint, you get to pick your vocal identity. Now, how much of that can you actually control? Nature versus nurture. Obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but your voice is a part of your body. It's ligaments, it's muscles, it's tissue, and it's all of these pieces together operating to make sound. So just like runners or other athletes, voice users are born with a certain set of muscles and apparatus, but how you use it is up to you, right? So there are a lot of things, and how we really consume sound is more on the nurture side. And that's what we're going to talk about today, right? So what is cultural and what isn't? Now, when we think about the cultural voice, a really obvious way to start to think about this is accents. Babies aren't born with a Southern accent. My family is predominantly Southern, and so that's why I'm going to use this as an example. But babies aren't born with a Southern accent, right? They don't come out crying with a twang. Instead, they listen to the voices around them, and all of a sudden, they're going to have an accent, right? And that's what they pick up, okay? Now, that said, in an even more nuanced way, we do this with color and tone. For example, my mother is a minister, and so when I grew up, she would have her mom voice, her Susan voice, and we would just chit chat, and that's mom is mom. And then on Sunday morning, she would get up and stand in front of the pulpit, and she would say, "Good morning and welcome. No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome." And it was like, who is this woman? That is a totally different voice. My mom sounds a lot like me, right? So 4-year-old Margaret is sitting there listening to mom's minister voice versus her real voice or her everyday mom voice, and go through life, grow up into my teenage years, and it's time for confirmation. And for the very first time, I get up and I stand in front of the congregation, and teenage Margaret goes, "Good morning." And I had adopted my mother's minister voice because I'd been conditioned to think that that's what you sound like when you stand behind a pulpit, right? And this is how our voices are developed. So if you have a sound that you make, think about who around you makes those same sounds. We do this with colloquialisms, we do this with accents, but we also do this with other noises we make in our voices. You can hear familial ties, and not all of it has to do with your DNA. Some of it is choice. So what vocal characteristics can you actually control? Your cadence. So your cadence is how short or how long your speech pattern is. The use of silence. So not all silence is made equal. So if we speak with a lot of silence here versus having silence that makes sense, right? That's the difference of silence. Who here has been told they need to have more silence when they're public speaking? Anybody? Well, good for you all. A lot of times we have I was told I need to have more silence so I don't have run-on sentences. People can take time to listen. But you have to have silence with purpose and silence with intent. Vocal fry. Does anyone here know what vocal fry is? Yeah? Very cool. So vocal fry is this sound, right? So a lot of you may have heard about this because as women, we are told that we have a problem with vocal fry. Let me tell you, every single client I've worked with, no matter their gender identity, has had a problem with vocal fry. I have to deal with it all the time. It's just because the sound of vocal fry is so much lower, I think perhaps it's more obvious in our bodies and in our voices. Vocal fry is basically what happens when there isn't enough energy and airflow to make your vocal folds vibrate. And so they high five instead of vibrate. So you get this sound. And we know that it makes you seem less trustworthy, less knowledgeable, and harder to understand. And research tells us that. So we personally advise people not to utilize vocal fry. However, everything we tell you today is a choice. So these are all the options you have, and you get to pick. Inflection. Does anybody here know what inflection is? Yay! Okay, has anybody here heard of upspeak? Does anyone know what upspeak is? Yeah, I was using it in the beginning. So inflection is when you go up in pitch and down in pitch. The opposite of inflection is monotone, Bueller, anyone, right? Inflection is super important. It's one of the primary characteristics of a charismatic speech pattern. However, upspeak is a subcategory of inflection, and it makes you sound like you have a question all the time. So this is an attribute that is frequently attributed to women as well. However, I will say this, just like with vocal fry, pretty much every client I've ever worked with has utilized upspeak. And for some reason, we just get kind of tagged with that. Anyway, so inflection is another vocal characteristic that you can control. Volume, how loud you are, how quiet you are, how you do loud, how you do quiet, right? Not all volume is the same. Speed, how fast you speak. So you have heard me speak probably way too fast during this workshop thus far. I personally am from New England, and so we speak very, very fast as our cultural speech pattern. And so I always am constantly reminding myself to slow down. However, my family from the South, my Uncle Jack, he talks like this, and it is really slow, right? And so it just depends. Speed is something that you can control. Consonants, like we talked before about with culture in the United States and in the English speaking language, consonants are how we show expression. So how strong they are, how weak they are, how long they are, how short they are. How you use your consonants is the characteristic you can control. Resonance, you heard me play with this in the very beginning. All I'm doing right now is changing the resonance inside my body, and it is completely changing how you're interacting with me. The term that you might be familiar with for resonance is tone. But resonance is underneath tone. Tone is resonance plus aspiration, which we'll talk about later. Pitch home is the pitch frequency with which your voice oscillates around. So a really famous example of someone who altered their pitch home is Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos. Does anybody here know who Elizabeth Holmes is? Do we know what her voice sounds like? Yeah, so she lowered her pitch home, right? And she lowered her voice, and she adopted a traditionally masculine speech pattern. Okay, so this is the artificial lowering of your pitch home. You can also raise your pitch home, right? So if I wanted to talk like this, I could. For me, this is my comfortable pitch home, which is why this is where I'm speaking for you today. Your pitch home is a really interesting concept for women in leadership specifically, because in the Western world, studies tell us that lower pitch frequencies are perceived as being stronger leadership sounds. However, at Peacock Voices, instead of artificially lowering your pitch home, so doing this thing, which kind of sounds a bit distorted, right? If I lower my voice too much, all of a sudden I sound not quite like me, and this doesn't quite match who I am and who I want to be. So instead, we use resonance to make the perception of a lower pitch home, Do you hear how this is seen as richer and thicker and lower? And all I did was change resonance instead of this, which is the same pitch home, but I have a little bit different resonance choices. Does that make sense? I'm looking at everybody's videos. Very cool. Okay. So breathiness, this is the other component of tone. This is added aspiration into your sound. So having, I think of like Marilyn Monroe, like happy birthday, Mr. President, this kind of breathiness versus no breathiness in your sound, okay? The only time I ever really suggest adding that aspiration into your sound, there's two moments. One, if it's a really heated moment that you're trying to bring down, and then you can kind of add a little bit of that aspiration or breathiness to your sound just to kind of calm everyone down. The other time is if you want to prove a point, but not in a prove a point kind of way. So those are two times that I would add aspiration or that breath into your sound. Otherwise, a clean sound is definitely what we suggest. Continuous sound is another vocal characteristic that you can control. So continuous sound I've been using pretty much this entire presentation. However, a very famous example of this is through the singing preacher. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is probably arguably the most famous singing preacher of all time, but I have a dream that one day and the sound never ends. Now, in conversation, obviously, we're not going to use that level of continuous sound. However, if I don't have continuous sound, do you hear how choppy this is? Versus if I have continuous sound, how connected and melodic this line is. So that's a vocal characteristic that you can control. And then finally, energy. So I've said this before, I'll say it again. Energy is the life force of sound. Without energy, you cannot have consistent airflow, and without consistent airflow, you cannot have consistent sound. So energy is super, super important. Does anyone have any questions? We're about to get into the actual noise making portion. So I'm going to stop the share for a second and see if anyone has questions before we move on to the noise making. No? Okay, beautiful. Then just kidding. I would love for during this portion, everybody to come off mute if you're willing to. We're going to make silly noises together. What we're going to do is explore breath for voice, your resonance, and then we're going to go into the authentic, persuasive, and powerful speaking voice and those attributes. Now, I said this at the beginning, but I want to say it again. If something feels uncomfortable, if something doesn't feel right, if you're confused, please ask, please say something. Okay, Cassidy is in the chat. I also can see the chat. We want to make sure that these are exercises that you can be practicing when you are not here and when you're not with us. And instead, you can take them and play with them yourself. All right. First, we're going to start with a little bit of breath work that also explores your resonance. So what I want everybody to do is I want you to smile real wide. And I want you to pant like a chihuahua. And I always think of Bruiser Woods from Legally Blonde for this for some reason. I don't know, maybe he's the second most famous chihuahua outside of Taco Bell. But I want you to pant like a chihuahua, feeling the cold air move through the roof of your mouth all the way to the back of your throat. And it'll look and sound like this. Yeah! Does everyone feel that cold spot kind of moving up the roof of your mouth to the back of your throat? Very cool. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna move that cold spot down. And we're gonna move that to right basically the back of your throat. And I do this by breathing like Darth Vader. So it'll sound like this. And if you don't know who Darth Vader is, I'm sorry. I'll give you a viewing list for the weekend. No. Yeah, so beautiful. Try rounding your mouth. Yeah. Is everyone feeling that cold spot in the back of your throat? Maybe it's getting a little dry. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. So now we're going to move that cold spot even further down to where you would gargle mouthwash. Now, this is going to sound a lot like mouth breathing. I think of a character from Hey Arnold. I don't know if I'm aging myself with this, but when the kid who had the headgear, and I want you to stick your tongue out just a little bit, and it sounds like this. I know, really cute. If you feel like things flying around down there, spit and mucus and all that jazz, you're just as low as we want you to be. Is everyone feeling that? Yeah. So anybody like, wow, I wish my allergies weren't bad right now. No, just kidding. But the reason why all that stuff was flying around down there is you just met your vocal folds. So that's where your vocal folds live, right in that kind of gargly space. And then that space in the back of your throat was your pharynx. And your pharynx is your primary resonator. So that is what makes you, me sound like me. It's a really important part of your voice. And what we did was basically follow in reverse order where vibrations go once they're created in your vocal folds, where they bang around in to create sound and leave your body. So, how sound works is air comes from your lungs up your trachea, and sitting on top of your trachea is your larynx, and that's the home of your vocal folds. Your vocal folds then suction together on that airflow and start vibrating on the air pressure. There's no sound at this point. So, your vocal folds, those vibrations with nothing to bounce around off of, is silent. Then what happens is those vibrations bounce around your vocal tract, which is what we just explored with air, and that's how they collect sound. Okay, so depending on the shape of your vocal tract, that will determine the resonant quality of your sound. Okay, so understanding all of these different resonators and how you can play with them is a really crucial part of using sound and creating sound. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to look at breath for voice. So, how can we breathe to support your voice? Also, anybody who has a lot of issues with nerves when they're doing public speaking, I discovered this. One of my best friend is a child psychologist, and she works primarily with refugees. And we met up, and we were in Istanbul at the same time. Turns out we teach the same breathing. She teaches it for calming down, and I teach it for your voice. So it's great breath technique either way. But this is specifically for voice. So, what we do is we recognize that our lungs are attached from behind your collarbone to the bottom of your rib cage. And the majority of your lung tissue is actually in the back side of your body. So, if everybody goes to take in a deep breath, can you take in a deep breath for me? Yeah, you're at the doctor's office. Take that big breath in. Yeah. How many people's shoulders just went up when they took a deep breath? Yeah, right? Awesome. Very cool. So there's no lung tissue up here. Your lung tissue is actually here. I'm gonna sit on my tippy toes. It's all in the back side, and there are some in the front too. When we go to take a breath for speaking and for voice, we actually want to fill the back of our body instead of up here, because doing this tightens all of this. And your larynx, the home of the vocal folds that I talked about earlier, it's a suspension system. So it's meant to wobble around. So if everything here gets tight, then all of a sudden things can't wobble. So we want to keep our shoulders and chest nice and relaxed and instead breathe into our back. Now, how are we going to do this? I'm going to show you 3 ways to find this. We're going to start with the most foolproof and then work our way to what you'll use in everyday life. For anyone who is comfortable, I would love for you to go get into child's pose. And in this child's pose, what I want you to do is I want you to have your big toes touching, your knees pointing outward, your forehead on the ground, and your forearms on the ground. All of this with the idea that it should be comfortable. And I want you to inhale, imagining you're breathing in through a straw with lots of resistance. What you're going to feel is your back expanding. If you are sitting and you can't get into child's pose, just practice the breathing in through the straw. That'll still kind of help get your back expanded. But if you're in child's pose right now, you should be feeling that back expansion, mostly because in that position, your shoulders literally cannot raise and your stomach can't really go out. So you have to feel the back movement. But yeah. So for someone who's been able to move into child's pose, can you feel that expansion in the backside of your body? Can we get a thumbs up or an off mute? Yes.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yay. Amazing. Okay, so now everybody can get back up. That was the floor work for the day. And now this is we're gonna go into something that you can do while you're seated, okay? So we're gonna put our arms out like goalposts with your shoulders relaxed. And what I want you to do is inhale, bringing your arms to each other. Exhale, opening. Really trying to keep your shoulders and chest relaxed the whole time. Inhale together. Exhale, opening. Good. Inhale together. Exhale, opening. Fabulous. So, those are just great ways to feel that expansion in your back. With this one, you almost feel nothing because by bringing your arms together, you are literally making the space for your lungs to expand. But now, how do we do this in front of people? Because as great as it would be to be able to do this in front of a presentation, it's not really practical. Um, so what we teach is a pelvic tilt for your inhale. Now, the reason behind this is not just because it's that really efficient back breath that brings air into your body the way that your lungs are supposed to operate, but it also triggers what's called a laryngeal release. So, your larynx, like I said, was a suspension system, which means it can tighten, it can go up, it can go down, it can go back, it can go front. This relaxes it, which then makes your vocal tract, that air, the cold spots that we explored earlier, it makes that longer, which then gives you more opportunity to play with your sound and to make resonance adjustments. And so the reason why we teach this pelvic tilt breath is because that does that laryngeal release and it activates all the muscles that support your airflow. What you do on your inhale, and I might actually lower my desk so you can see this better or tilt this. Okay. So on your inhale, you want to tilt, inhale, tuck your booty under so you almost get a flat back. On your exhale, relax. On your inhale, tuck in. On your exhale, relax. Now, this is a really big movement because we're practicing right now. But in reality, just a millimeter of movement is going to get all of your back muscles relaxed, your lungs expanding, and your pelvic floor engaged. So that breath is absolutely helpful, not just for what we talked about, but also, again, for the energy. I will show you. If I take a high breath in, hi, my name is Margaret Izardoskui. So that's a short resonance tract. I do that back breath we just did with the pelvic tilt. Hi, my name is Margaret Izardoskui. Do you hear the difference from a leadership perspective and a difference in sound quality? Yeah, it's wild how your intake of breath can truly affect your sound. So, this is the conclusion of the breath portion. Are there any questions about breathing before we move on?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I got the third kind of breathing. I've got the up here breathing and the kind of like yoga breathing, Darth Vader breathing. I'm not sure I got the third type.
So, that exercise was just to explore your resonance tract. The third kind was the back. So
Okay.
that back breathing is the breathing we want you all to adopt because that's where your
Okay.
lungs have the majority of their tissue. So the child's pose and the goalpost and the pelvic tilt are three different ways to find that back expansion. They're not the only ways to find the back expansion. We've just found that that progression is the easiest way to help people locate that back expansion.
Okay.
And the reason why we do that is for the laryngeal release, the efficiency, and then the pelvic tilt also has that activation of all the muscles that support your flow.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a blog post about breathing that I think Cassidy could probably drop in the chat that talks a little bit more about it. So,
Yeah, I
so
just want to draw attention to Danielle's question because you also asked this in the chat, which was the vocal folds breathing. It was the third like location. It was the mouth breathing
with your
part
tongue
of,
out.
yeah. So that was
Yeah.
what Danielle was struggling, I think, to find. And so just Danielle, I put it in the chat, but playing around with the mouth shapes a little bit more, sticking your tongue out can really help with that one. And closing your eyes can help with visualization for all of that as well. But it is
Yeah.
just to like explore the resonance tract mostly.
Yeah. If you wanted to like gargle some water, feel where that is, swallow and then breathe into that space. It's another way to kind of find that low spot. Beautiful. Well, if there are no other questions, we're going to move on to resonance.
So you
Fabulous.
just, you find your back, learn how to back breathe, and then it becomes more natural
Yeah.
as you're, okay.
Yeah.
So, do your pelvic tilt and keep doing your back breathing, because I just would slow down, I think, if I kept focusing on my breathing.
Yeah, so we never suggest introducing these immediately into your everyday like work life. It's one of those things where you practice it when you're at home, when you're with people that you're comfortable around practicing with. And this breath that we're teaching outside of the pelvic tilt, the back breath is what you do when you're sleeping. Unless you have a paralyzed diaphragm or that's the only time I've ever met someone who wasn't able to do that expansion the way that we normally teach it. And then that's a totally different ball game. And we don't do that work because we're not medical professionals. But in general, when you're sleeping, that's just the optimal way of making air exchange happen in your body. And so your body will adopt it pretty quickly, usually. Yeah. It's just being cognizant of it during times when you might be stressed. I call this my panic breath because you only do it when you're crying or running. So if you're you're like, I'm dying, right? And so teaching your body, no matter what, to utilize this breath, that's the work. So for resonance, which is really, really important for sound, because this is the main component of tone, we have separated it into two axes. The y-axis from the top of your head to your chest, and the x-axis from the front of your mouth to the back of your throat. This is not actually how resonance works, but it's the easiest way for us to showcase what's happening externally to all of you. So just so you know, resonance is not on axes, but we'll play with it this way today. We're going to start with the y-axis, which is most traditionally associated with pitch frequency. So the higher your pitch, the higher you're going to feel vibrations in your body. The lower the pitch, the lower you're going to feel vibrations in your body. The way we explore this is on an oo vowel. And I want you to start at the lowest pitch that is comfortable in your body. So please do not feel the need to match my voice with this. We are exploring this with your voice. So you're going to start at the lowest pitch frequency that feels comfortable with your body and move to the highest pitch frequency that's comfortable in your body in one fluid siren on an oo vowel. And I want you to see if you can feel the vibrations move up. So it'll sound like this. And as you're doing it, you'll feel the vibrations kind of move up your body. So I'd love for everybody to come off mute. And then on the count of three, we're going to do it together so no one's alone. All right, 1, 2, 3. Nice! Did everyone feel the vibrations move up in their body?
Yeah.
Very
Yes.
cool. And now we're going to go down. So we're going to start at the tippy top and go down.
Ooh.
Nice. Okay, so who was able to go lower when they started high and went down? Did anybody feel like they went? Yeah, me too. And did anybody feel like they couldn't start as high as they ended when they were moving up?
Yes.
Yeah, totally normal, right? This is completely normal. All that exercise does is it just kind of is a way to stretch through this vertical movement of resonance. Where your Y resonance is useful is if you're pitching or in sales. Having a slightly higher frequency is a big component of showing passion and excitement. So if I am showcasing to you that I am so passionate about this, I'm going to use just a slightly higher resonance on the y-axis because that's going to show you how passionate I am, right? So that's when that would be really useful. Okay. Now we're going to go to the x-axis, which is our real command center. Okay. This is the one that I played with the most throughout this presentation. How we go through the x-axis is we start with vowels. The E is going to be at the front of your mouth, and we go all the way back to the oo, which lives in Darth Vader's space. Okay. We're going to do this on one pitch. Everybody pick a pitch that feels comfortable for you. So again, please don't feel the need to match me. And we're going to go one vowel at a time. So we're going to start with E. This E vowel is going to feel really, really far forward, almost like it's in front of your mouth. And it'll sound like this. E. So on 3, can we all try that? 1, 2, 3.
E.
Good. I heard a little bit of E. I want it really far forward. I think of Janice from Friends. She's like, Chandler, oh my God. It's so far forward. E, right up here. Can we try it one more time? 1, 2, 3. E. Good. Now we're going to move back to A, and the A vowel is going to live right in between your canines. So it'll sound like this. E, and you'll feel the vibrations move back to in between your canines. So let's try it on 3. 1, 2, 3. E. Good, very good. If you can, try and stay on the same pitch, just because pitch will also change where you feel. So if we keep it monotone or on one pitch frequency all the way back, you'll really be able to feel the movement backwards. Now we're going to move to ah, which you're going to feel the vibrations in between your molars. And it'll sound like this. E, ah. Good. So on 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Oh my gosh, everybody's ahs were really good. I expected, usually when we do this with Chicago groups, we get yeah, and the ah stays forward because of Chicago's accent. And so I just feel like I need to send the ah further back and think of a posh British accent. And so the ah goes further back. But everybody did it. So good for you. And if I didn't hear you or if you were on mute and you did have a forward ah, just really think of the ah moving a tick further back into that more British space. So now we're going to go to O, and O is going to live behind your molars. And it sounds like this. In my body, this starts to sound a little silly. That's not going to be the case for every person's body, okay? But it sounds like this. E-A-O. Can we try that on 3? 1, 2, 3. E-A-O. Good. It gets harder as we add it up. Good. So the O is going to be a little bit hootier than I heard from a lot of folks. And this is totally normal for it to get trickier as we get further back, especially as women. So I just want you to listen to once in between the ah and o. Oh, you know, that's one of my clients said it felt like holding ice in the back of your mouth, the O. Like you've ever held ice in between your teeth or in the back of your mouth. She said that's what it felt like. So let's try it on 3. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Good, very good. I heard a lot more of the O's all the way back. And now the oo is going to be all the way where that Darth Vader cold spot was. And in my body, this sounds very silly. It sounds like this. All the way back here. So on 3, let's try it. 1, 2, 3. Good, very good. So the end goal with this exercise is that eventually you can do something like or even on one vowel. Not just because it's a great party trick and you sound like a didgeridoo, but also because imagine the control you have. So imagine you're sitting in a meeting and you had an idea and no one is listening. And all of a sudden you can add a little bit more of that O space to your sound and you have more presence. Or perhaps you're talking with someone and you're really wanting them to understand why you were so excited about this, right? And that's also a resonance shift. Or perhaps you just want to be you. And this is your sound that you got to pick because you really like it. Having that flexibility of your resonance tract gives you a ton of power. Okay. So this is the end of resonance. Are there any questions before we move on to the traits for your charismatic, authentic, and persuasive speaking voice? Say that 5 times fast. No? Okay, beautiful. We're gonna get rocking and rolling then. Characteristics of an authentic, persuasive, and powerful speaking voice. That is a mouthful. 1, breath, right? Breath is basically the foundation of sound. Without air pressure, you do not have vibrations. Without vibrations, you do not have sound. So having control over your breath means having control over sound, which is why that's the first thing we always teach, because learning how to use your breath is absolutely vital to having control over your voice. Full resonance control, because there are moments when you want to be really powerful. There are moments when you want to be really persuasive. And all of them should be authentic. And having an understanding of your resonance, the ability to navigate through that resonance, and understanding the implications of different types of resonance will allow you to have that really persuasive and powerful speaking voice. We also want to have high energy. I said it before, I'll say it again. Energy is the life force of sound. It is so, 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 so important to have high energy when you're speaking. Large inflection. So inflection, going up in pitch and down in pitch. Many studies show that large inflection is correlated with really persuasive speech patterns. So people want to buy what you're selling when you use a lot of inflection, right? Versus if you're pretty monotone, people are going to be less engaged. Continuous sound and air, which we talked about, having that really melodic speech pattern that's really connected. I always say that when silence occurs and it's not with intent, it's very disengaging. So having that continuous sound and continuous airflow allows for your listener to actually organize and understand versus having this kind of choppy speech pattern. A command of silence is very important. As I talked about, it's kind of the sibling to continuous sound and air. Having a command of silence and using silence as a tool to help your listener understand and internalize, instead of having silence just be kind of random, right? And then finally, speak for them and not for you. Ideally, when we're speaking for our listeners to understand and internalize our content. And if we speak from that perspective, we get rid of all the filler words. We get rid of all the excess, because you're really just trying to constantly get your point to be internalized and understood. Okay? So, takeaways from today. This is a quick hour. Hopefully you have more knowledge about your voice. You have some tools to explore this on your own and you feel empowered to do so. We hope you're a little bit curious, and also we just hope you had a great time. This is really fun for both Cassie and I. We love doing this work. We love working with women, especially. Obviously, it's very near and dear to our hearts. And so we hope you had a fun time playing with us today. And we do want to thank you for your willingness to make noises, to explore your breathing. I know it's very different from a standard communications workshop, but hopefully you had a good time. I want to finish with one of my favorite quotes. There's a power in allowing yourself to be known and heard, in owning your unique story and using your authentic voice. And that's from Michelle Obama. And we really just hope that you now feel like you have some tools to explore and own your authentic voice. If you would like to get a little bit of personalized feedback, we do offer 15-minute micro sessions for $15, where we basically just spend that time giving you targeted exercises that you can use and practice on your own. And then if you have any questions, we are here as a resource for you. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us at Hello Peacock Voices. Find us on LinkedIn. We're here, we're around. And yeah, does anyone have any questions? I'm gonna stop the share. We have a couple minutes.
Margaret, can you
one.
actually put your screen back up with the QR code, just in case people
sorry,
don't
I
snag
just
that?
like to stare at everyone's faces, but you're right, that's a good point. Okay.
And that's around the
Thank you.
question that I had. Yeah, we just emailed the hello@peacockvoices.com if we want the 15-minute session.
No, if you go, well, you can do that, but also you can go to, and now let's see if I know how to use technology. So this is a real thing that's going to happen. Is there a way for me? This QR code or
Okay.
that
Okay.
link. And I think
Thank
Catherine
you.
might be able to throw that link into the chat. But yeah. Are there any questions about what you learned today? It's a lot, I know.
Would you recommend practicing by recording yourself on Zoom, or how do you?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to practice. So the breath work, I'm a huge fan of habit stacking. Has anyone here read Atomic Habits?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, nobody, I don't know a single adult who's like, yes, I have an extra 45 minutes in my day to dedicate to this. It just doesn't happen, right? So I always suggest habit stacking. So if you normally work out in the morning and you have a stretching routine you do after your workout, spend a minute or two in that child's pose, feeling your back expand, right? Just put it right on top of that habit that you already have. Or if you take yoga, honestly, when I do a yoga class, I spend the majority of the time just focusing on my back breath because it's a great way to do that. And breathing is already built into that workout. And then when it comes to the resonance exercises that we did today, if you just took the amount of time it takes for you to wash your dishes or unload your dishwasher or fold your laundry, anything like that, playing with it and just explore how silly sounds you make. If you have kids and you read aloud to them, think about the character voices you use. How extreme can you make those voices? The key to vocal control starts with flexibility, right? The more flexible you are, the more opportunities you have, the more control you can have. And then as you kind of gain this flexibility through the exercises or through playing with characters, whatever it is, then you can start to decide, oh, I really like that sound. Or you can know, I mean, the research is out there on a lot of this. I know that if I'm trying to have a really strong leadership presence, I need to have that rich resonance because that's what's going to make me sound more powerful and more like I know what I'm talking about, right? And so that is why I do suggest reading aloud a lot. If you don't have kids, there's a book that I recommend called The Book of Joy, just because it's really easy to pick up and put down. It's the summit of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop Desmond Tutu on happiness, the science of happiness. So it's also just a joyful book, but it's a really easy book to pick up and put down. And the real thing behind it is that it's all conversation. So if you are going to read aloud, I would suggest finding something that's conversational. So it's not necessarily a Jane Austen moment, but if you're reading a memoir or you're reading, a self-help book, you could read that aloud and play with voices. But yeah, and if you want to record, if you have an iPhone, there's an app called Voice Memo that's actually built into your iPhone that you can use to record. And everyone's iPhone has them. But yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Now I'm conscious about how I talk, though. I'm like,
Well, like I said, if anybody has any other questions, please do not hesitate to send an email because we're here as a resource and we'd love to talk with you. So
thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.